We're at Captain Keeney Pass now in Malheur County, eastern Oregon, and behind me you can see miles and miles of the original Oregon Trail, the old wagon ruts on this trail. And I wanted to take a moment before explaining that the Van Ornum wagon train passed over this, and a lot of other immigrants who passed over and were killed by Indians during the Indian Wars. I wanted to tell a history of pioneering in general, because I believe that a lot of these mountain men and a lot of this history traces back to Ashley's 100. There was always a sort of pioneering spirit. You had Lewis and Clark, who contacted the Arikara up the Missouri River. And then in the early 1800s, if you see the start of the movie The Revenant, I believe 1806, Ashley led 100 men up this river to fur trap. And by that point in time, the Arikara went from friendly to two of their chiefs had gone to Washington, D.C. and died of disease. They believed that they were killed in D.C., so they went to hostile. So Ashley's 100 were 100 men who went up there to trap and trade, and they came back riddled with PTSD. And a lot of the time, they didn't want to be a part of society anymore, and they felt the need to just go explore the open plains. Many of them died, but one of them, and many others, but one of them in particular, Captain Keeney, he came over here to Oregon, and he earned the title captain because of his service in the Indian Wars that followed. And he had this sort of wandering spirit, wandering mentality. He settled with a small family in eastern Oregon, not too far from the coast, but he always wandered. He opened up a trading post in Vail, Oregon in 1865. He opened up probably one of the first well-maintained river crossings on the Snake River, and he was involved in the gold rush of the 1860s. Now, his story also goes that there's a buried treasure. He was moving treasure from the gold rush in Mormon Basin along the Dales up back to society where he would bring them back the money. It was kind of like he was a carrier between the gold miners and the buyers of the gold, and he would bring the money back. No one ever found this gold. He was shot, and apparently he shot himself accidentally, buried this gold, and he later died of his wounds without ever telling anybody where this gold was. And in 1860, the Van Ornum party, which would later go on to be massacred about 30 or so miles up the road, passed up over this pass. And once they were massacred on September 9th and 10th, they tried to make it back up over this pass, and they made it a few miles beyond it, and they established what is now known as Starvation Camp. And at this camp, they were basically surrounded by Indians. They had all of their weapons taken away because they were starved to death and couldn't put up much of a fight. And they were rescued, only 10 of them, weeks later by an Army rescue search party. But this was a fascinating sight, dating back really to men who worked under Jim Bridger for the Rocky Mountain Trading Company, and Jim Bridger himself was a part of Ashley's 100. So I believe that everything traces back to William Ashley and Ashley's 100. In May of 1852, John D. Henderson and his family left Independence, Missouri, looking to settle in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. And they went along the old Oregon Trail, and apparently John Henderson and an unknown companion whose name has since been lost to history left the Snake River trying to scout out for water to bring back to their family. But it was a 20-mile journey over Keeney Pass, and it proved too arduous, and unaware of how close the Malheur River was, they both died of thirst, although later tales said that it might have been mountain fever or one of these other diseases, but it's pretty obvious looking at the historic records that it was thirst. And they were buried here, their name inscribed on the rock, and it's about a mile south of Vail, Oregon. That's the old Opera House. I believe this is sort of an art museum now. And the town of Vail is kind of fizzling out because the town of Oregon, just on the border with Idaho, about 20 miles to the east of here, is now a hot spot for, you know, kind of the dealings that would go on just over the border. You know, weed is illegal in Idaho, but it's legal in Oregon. So basically the town of Ontario really grew and dwarfed the town of Vail, and the town here is kind of dying now. And this is one of the murals that you'll see out west. All of these around the outer fringes of it are the brands of different cattlemen in the area. And some of these are probably run out of town now because a lot of this is, dried up over the years, but you can see famous cowboy history in eastern Oregon, Malheur County. The first major gathering point in the state of Oregon for pioneers on the Oregon Trail was in what is now Vail. At the time, it would have only been one trading post. Now, this trading post from the Journals of Pioneers goes all the way back to 1852, 1853. Basically, an independent mountain man got established in the local area and created a post, which we don't know too much about. But by 1865, a man named Jonathan Keeney came out and made his own, more permanent cabin, and he had a very large ranch around here. And he was motivated a lot by wanderlust and a desire to be alone and to travel. His family was mainly over in western Oregon along the coast, but he was always out here on the Idaho border trading with Indians and pioneers. He had a very large ranch, and in 1872, the Reinhardt family, Lewis and Amanda Reinhardt, came out and tore down this original cabin, which was at that point in disrepair, and they built this stone house. And it has been kind of a little museum along the old Oregon Trail for a long time, but, with COVID and everything, a lot of this stuff has been shut down. It just doesn't have the funds necessary to operate as it used to.